the whole science behind productivity. You need somewhere where you could work, you have a good mind space.
Hello, and welcome to our next episode of Pioneers Pathway Podcast. As always, I'm sure you know our names by now, but let me say it again, just in case you're new to watching us. My name's Liam, and I'm joined today by my good friend Sharia. How are you doing, Sharia? You all good?
Yeah, all good, Liam, all good. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. So today, we have a really interesting one actually, talking about workspace, and offices and sort of working environment, which I think is really cool because a lot of people kind of always focus on the business, but they don't focus on the environment that the business is operating in, right? And how that's conducive to, sort of how employees work and how effective they are. It's quite interesting, isn't it, Sharon?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think if you were to go back, maybe say to the baby boomer generation, for them it was purely, you go to the office, you do your work, you're out, that's it. But, when you have millennials, you have Gen Z who are now starting to get into the workforce, they don't want to play in office. They want more things. They want something exciting. The whole science behind productivity. You need somewhere where you could work, you have a good mind space, and that
But it's also sorry, the collaboration, right? So productivity, but it's the collaboration, right? And that's companies have really focused on that more and more, haven't they?
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. Because before, what used to happen, you just sat in your cubicle. That's it. You're sitting in front of your laptop, typing away. But if you're in an open space, you might overhear, a conversation about a project. It might be a project that potentially excites you. You might have another idea. You might, speak to someone who's near you and discuss something, and, something else might result out of it, right? That's why, especially even in the startup space, rather than people working from their homes, people are working in co-working spaces, right? That's the whole idea behind WeWork. WeWork essentially grew from the idea of, startups forming their own offices within a bigger office. And the whole point being is you can meet other founders there and you can have, business conversations and potentially, something else may arise from it. The whole idea is having that collaboration. It can have a wider impact.
I was going to say, in terms of the startup space, because you're working in the startup space, do you find can you give us an account maybe of or sort of your experience with how you designed your working environment? So do you work at home, right? You work remotely, but do you find if maybe there's co-working spaces or environments that you have used or you want to use in the future?
Well, definitely. I would say from my, startup time, it's been very short duration. But I can tell you, especially when I was back in my third year of uni, what I used to do was occasionally when I'm studying in the morning, fine, I used to do it from home. But after lunch, I used to want a bit of a change. So I used to head up to, my Costa, grab a coffee, and used to work there. And generally what you find is when you work in a different environment, you're in a much better headspace, even though if you might not be, collaborating with those around you, just being in a different environment, seeing humans and that at the end of the day, we are social animals, right? Humans need to see other humans, right? And that's one thing that I especially realized when I was working when I used to work with my laptop in a coffee shop. And that's, I think, something that we've realized post-pandemic, right? Pre-pandemic, everyone used to go to the office. That was pretty standard. And then obviously during the pandemic, we were all at home. And one thing that was pretty clear, speaking to like a wide range of people, is they didn't so much miss the travel, but, having conversations within the office with people they knew, that was highly beneficial, right? You need that sort of in-person social interaction. You might hate your coworkers, fair enough, but still, being able to speak to another human is essentially how we've always, worked as a society.
Could you maybe give us an example of a company which you think has done this really well? because I can. Maybe I'll start off. I think Google do this really well. Google, and especially in America, they have huge campuses. They have the full ecosystem gyms, nurseries for your kids, really good transportation links. You've got food places. They're really trying to say, come and you're not only working here, spend your life here, right? And that sort of fosters a really good community work and a really good productivity. Is there any other examples you can think of? Maybe even in India, which you know of?
Well, I'll be honest. I can't think of any examples apart from the FANG group. So FANG obviously being Facebook, Apple, Nvidia. There's a couple more. Amazon and Google, right? So these guys, I think, apart from what their core competencies are, I think they're also renowned for their offices, right? I mean, like you mentioned, the Google office is pretty famous for having a gym, having a sleep pod, getting free food on the campus. I don't know if there's any other examples, but I can certainly tell you in banking, for example, I've heard that the top executives, they tend to have their own floor. They tend to get their own, facilities. They have a special canteen. Obviously, a lot of companies these days, they invest in some form of, games for the employees. So you might have a pool table. You might have a table tennis table within the office. And the general premise of it being is that when you're burnt out from your work, you want a quick break. You play one of these games, right? You freshen up a bit and you go back to work. And sometimes that productivity boost, even from taking that 5-minute break, is far better than if you were just to, sit through it and just work nonstop, right? We're humans. We're not machines, right? I know AI is coming to pretty much everything, but we as humans, we need to take a break, right? And that's what companies have been realizing, especially Google, like you mentioned, right? That the whole point behind their office idea, and like you said, let's make this a home in a way. They want you to stay in the office for longer and work. We'll give you absolutely everything you need. Just stay in the office, do your work, and that's it. We don't want you to worry about anything else. That's the thinking that goes on behind these offices.
Yeah. So if you were designing an office, what would be the top things you'd want to be put inside them?
Well, okay, I'll tell you, this is completely down to my personal preferences.
No, 100%. Yeah.
Look, after work, everyone wants a nice nap, don't you? Right? A sleeping pod would be very, very nice. That's one thing I would want. I love working out, so I want a gym. And the reason I think having a gym as well is so important is that once you've done work, and for example, you hit the gym, you get so much mental clarity after that. So it has so many other benefits. So I think having a gym for the employees, perfect. And another thing I would suggest is having a proper cafe, right? Having somewhere where your employees can grab a coffee, sit. I don't want any sort of cubicles or proper typical office desk. I want your typical cafe layout, right? If you could have one floor just dedicated to that. Because I think if you're working in an office environment that doesn't feel like an office environment, there is going to be a huge boost you can get out of it, right? Because the office environment, what's the typical thing you associate? Oh, it's dull, have to upload the spreadsheets, do this, that, right? Typical things that people don't like to do. But if you make a cafe environment, right, something with a bit of a chatter, you can, nice view, doesn't feel like an office, people are going to be more likely to work. And they'll be more happy about it, right? Yeah. The end of the day is what makes a business? It's your employees, right? One of the main things that make your business is your employees. You talk about having a culture, and every successful founder will talk about having a culture that they want to bring. And what defines that culture? It's your employees being in line with it. So if you have a similar thing where all your employees are aligned, they are happy working in your office environment, and it's one thing to have all these values which you align with. As a founder, myself, I would want to create an environment for my employees where they are happy to work. Right?
Yeah.
It's not just
if they're happy, they're going to stay. They're going to stay long term, but they're also going to do a better job.
Yeah, exactly. So as I said, in short, it's one thing being aligned to the vision of the company. It's another thing the founder actively trying to make his working environment a better space for his employees.
Yeah, no, interesting. I think that's a really nice way to sort of conclude that. Making it's employee focused, right? You're there because the employees are what is going to make your company successful, and if they're happy, you're happy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And your balance sheets and your P&Ls can be pretty happy, isn't it?
Yeah, obviously, of course. Good stuff. Well, again, I say this all the time. If any of the viewers have any views, want to get in touch about this, let us know. But we're really excited to see you next time. We won't. I'm not going to say the exact topic because we'll keep that a bit of a surprise. But stay tuned, and we'll hear from you soon.
And as always, thank you for listening.